The stagecoach rolled into Brownsville, Texas on a blistering August afternoon in 1878, and Benjamin McClain watched from the shade of the livery stable as a woman in a traveling dress, the color of storm clouds, stepped down onto the dusty street, her left hand catching the afternoon sun, just right to send a flash of gold and diamonds straight into his eyes. He had been shoeing horses for the better part of 3 hours, his shirt soaked through with honest sweat, but something about the way she held herself made him set down his hammer and walk toward the street without thinking twice about it. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten, with dark hair pinned up under a modest hat and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. But it was that ring that held his attention, catching the light again as she reached up to adjust her bonnet. A man's promise worn on a stranger's hand. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat as he approached, "welcome to Brownsville. You look like you could use some help with those bags." She turned to him with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "That's kind of you, Mr. McClain." "Benjamin McClain. Most folks just call me Ben." He gestured to the 2 leather cases the driver was unloading. "Where are you headed? The boarding house, I suppose, Mrs. Henderson's place." Her voice carried an Eastern accent, refined but not pretentious. "I'm Victoria Brennan. I've come to teach at the schoolhouse." Ben hefted both cases as though they weighed nothing, which they nearly did not compared to the anvil he worked with daily. "Mrs. Henderson runs a respectable establishment. I'll walk you over there. It is not far, just past the general store." They walked in silence for a moment, the afternoon heat pressing down on them like a physical weight. Brownsville sat right on the Rio Grande, close enough to Mexico that you could hear roosters crowing from across the river on quiet mornings. The town had grown considerably since the war, with new buildings going up every few months and steamboats bringing goods upriver from the Gulf. "How long have you lived here?" Victoria asked, breaking the silence. "All my life, near about. My father came here in '52, started the livery with my uncle. They are both gone now, but the business keeps running." Ben glanced at her profile, noting the delicate line of her jaw, the way she kept her ringed hand tucked close to her side as though protecting it. "What brings a schoolteacher all the way from? Where is it you are from?" "Philadelphia." She said it quietly, like a confession. "I needed a change, a new start." He wanted to ask about the ring, about the man who had given it to her, but something in her tone warned him off the subject. Instead, he said, "You will like it here. The people are good, and the children need a proper teacher. The last one married a rancher and moved 50 miles north. Mrs. Henderson's boarding house was a 2-story white building with a wide porch and climbing roses that somehow survived the brutal Texas summers. The proprietress herself came out to greet them, a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a warm smile. "You must be Miss Brennan. We have been expecting you. The school board will be so relieved you have arrived safely." Mrs. Henderson took Victoria's hands in her own, then noticed the ring and raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Come in, come in. I have a lovely room prepared for you on the 2nd floor, catches the breeze from the river." Ben set the bags down in the front hall. "I will leave you to get settled, Miss Brennan. If you need anything, the livery is right where you first saw me." "Thank you, Mr. McClain." This time her smile reached her eyes, just barely. "You have been very kind." He touched his hat brim again and left, but the image of that ring stayed with him all through the rest of the afternoon and into the evening. He wondered about the man who had given it to her, wondered what kind of fool would let a woman like that travel 1,000 miles away. The next morning, Ben was working on a wagon wheel when he heard the school bell ring for the first time in 3 months. He could picture Victoria standing in that one-room schoolhouse at the edge of town, calling the children in for their lessons. He found himself thinking about her more than he should, given that ring on her finger. 3 days passed before he saw her again. She came to the livery leading a mare that belonged to the school board, concerned about a slight limp in the animal's front left leg. "I noticed it on the way back from the Miller Ranch," she explained, her hand gentle on the horse's neck. "I had to take some books to their daughter. She has been sick with fever." Ben examined the hoof and found a small stone wedged near the frog. He worked it out carefully and showed it to Victoria. "Nothing serious. She will be fine by tomorrow." "Oh, thank goodness, I was worried." Victoria watched him work with obvious interest. "You are very good with horses. Been doing it since I was 12. He set the hoof down and straightened. "How are you settling in? The children giving you any trouble? They are wonderful. Curious and bright, most of them. Though I think Tommy Henderson is more interested in catching lizards than learning his arithmetic." She laughed, and the sound was like water over stones, clear and musical. Ben found himself smiling. "Tommy is Mrs. Henderson's nephew. He has always been like that. But he is a good kid, just needs the right motivation. I will find it." She spoke with quiet confidence. Then, after a pause, "Mr. McClain, may I ask you something?" "Ben, please." "Ben." She looked down at her hands, at the ring that seemed to weigh heavy on her finger. "Is there a telegraph office in town?" "There is. Right next to the post office, 2 buildings down from the general store." He studied her face, saw something like sadness flickering there. "Are you expecting a message?" "I suppose I am. Or perhaps I am just hoping not to receive one." She said it so softly he almost missed it, then she seemed to shake herself. "Thank you for taking care of the horse. What do I owe you?" "Nothing. Consider it a welcome to Brownsville." When she started to protest, he held up a hand. "I mean it. We take care of our own here, and you are one of us now, whether you have been here 3 days or 3 years. Something shifted in her expression, a tightness around her eyes easing just slightly. "You are very kind, Ben. Thank you." She left, but the question about the telegraph stayed with him. Over the following weeks, Ben found himself noticing Victoria around town. She was always polite, always composed, but there was a distance to her that he could not quite bridge. She attended church on Sundays, sat with Mrs. Henderson, and helped with the social events that the ladies organized. The children clearly adored her, but she never took off that ring, and she never spoke of the man who had given it to her. September brought slightly cooler temperatures, though in South Texas that was relative. Ben was delivering a repaired saddle to the hotel when he saw Victoria coming out of the telegraph office, a piece of paper clutched in her hand and her face pale as milk. "Victoria." He forgot formality in his concern. "What is wrong?" She looked up at him, and he saw tears standing in her eyes. I am sorry, I need." She turned and walked quickly toward the boarding house, her skirts swishing with each step. Ben followed at a respectful distance, concerned. When she reached the boarding house, she sat down hard on the porch steps, the telegram still gripped in her white-knuckled hand. He sat down beside her, not touching, just present. "You want to talk about it?" he asked quietly. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, "His name is Richard Ashford. We have been engaged for 2 years. He is a lawyer in Philadelphia, very successful, very ambitious. Everyone said it was a perfect match. But you do not think so?" It was not a question. "I thought I loved him. I truly did. He was charming and intelligent, and he said all the right things." She twisted the ring on her finger. "But then he started making decisions without consulting me. Small things at first. Where we would live after the wedding. What kind of work I would be allowed to do, which was none. Who I could associate with. He wanted me to be the perfect society wife, hosting dinners and looking beautiful and never having an opinion that contradicted his." Ben listened, anger building slowly in his chest at a man he had never met. "So I applied for this position without telling him. When I got the acceptance letter, I was so happy, and I thought he would understand, that he would see how much it meant to me." Her voice broke slightly. "He forbade me to come, said it was beneath me, that I was throwing away my future for some childish whim. We had a terrible fight, and I left anyway. Took the ring, but told him I needed time to think." "And the telegram?" Ben asked gently. "He wants an answer, says he has been patient enough. Either I come home and set a wedding date, or the engagement is over." She looked at the ring as though it were a shackle. "Part of me thinks I should go back. It is the sensible thing. He can provide for me, give me a comfortable life. But you would not be happy." "No." The word came out as barely more than a whisper. "I would not be happy. And I think over time I would grow to resent him, maybe even hate him. Is that terrible?" "It is honest." Ben shifted to face her more fully. "Victoria, I have only known you a few weeks, but I can see clear as day that you belong here. Those children in that schoolhouse, they light up when they talk about you. You have made a difference already. And from what I can tell, you are happier here than you were back east, ring or no ring." She met his eyes, searching for something. "Why are you being so kind to me?" "Because kindness does not require a reason." He paused, weighing his next words carefully. "And because I think you deserve better than a man who tries to make you small." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling through them. "Thank you, Ben. I do not know what I would have done if I had not met you." He wanted to reach out, to take her hand, to tell her that he was falling in love with her more each day. Instead, he said, "Whatever you decide, I am here. No judgment, no expectations, just here." She nodded, wiping at her eyes with a handkerchief she pulled from her sleeve. "I need to think. I need to figure out what I truly want. Take all the time you need." Over the next few weeks, Victoria threw herself into her teaching with renewed energy. She organized a spelling bee that had the whole town turning out to watch, started a small lending library using books donated by families, and personally tutored 3 children who were falling behind. Ben watched from the periphery, helping where he could but never pushing, never demanding more than she was willing to give. He found excuses to see her, though. A loose board on the schoolhouse steps that needed fixing, a donation of leather scraps that the children could use for craft projects, an offer to help move the heavy desks when she wanted to rearrange the classroom. Each time they talked a little longer, shared a little more. He learned about her childhood, about the mother she had lost when she was 15, about her dreams of making a real difference in children's lives. She learned about his father's death 5 years prior, about the responsibility of running the livery alone, about his love for this wild border country that most Easterners could not understand. October arrived with its false promise of autumn. The days were still hot, but the nights cooled down enough to be pleasant. The town organized a harvest dance, and Ben spent an entire evening working up the courage to ask Victoria if she would attend with him. He found her after school one Friday, helping 2 small girls practice their letters on slates. "All right, Mary Sarah, that is excellent work. Now go on home before your mothers worry." Victoria smiled at the children as they gathered their things and scampered out, calling goodbye. "You are good with them," Ben observed from the doorway. Victoria looked up, surprise and pleasure mingling on her face. "Ben, I did not hear you come in. How long have you been standing there? Just a minute." He stepped inside, hat in hands. "I wanted to ask you something." "Of course." She set down the slate she had been holding and gave him her full attention. "There is a dance tomorrow night. The whole town will be there. Music, food, probably some very questionable dancing from folks who have no business attempting a waltz." He smiled, trying to ease the nervousness in his chest. "Would you do me the honor of accompanying me?" She looked down at her hands, at the ring that still circled her finger. "Ben, I do not know if that is appropriate. I am still engaged, technically." I am not asking you to marry me, Victoria. I am asking you to come to a dance. As friends, if that is all you are comfortable with." He took a step closer. "You have been here almost 2 months and you have been working yourself to exhaustion. You deserve an evening of fun." She bit her lip, clearly torn. Then something seemed to settle in her expression. "You are right. I have been hiding behind this ring long enough. I would love to go to the dance with you, Ben. Thank you for asking." His heart soared, but he kept his voice steady. "I will pick you up at 7. 7 is perfect." He left before he could do something foolish like kiss her right there in the schoolhouse. The next day passed in a blur of anticipation. He closed the livery early, washed up thoroughly, and put on his best shirt and jacket. When he arrived at the boarding house at precisely 7 o'clock, Victoria was waiting on the porch in a dress of deep green that brought out flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Her hair was arranged in an intricate style that must have taken an hour, and she looked so beautiful that for a moment he forgot how to breathe. "You look stunning," he managed. "Thank you." She took his offered arm, and he felt the warmth of her hand through his sleeve. "You clean up rather nicely yourself, Mr. McClain." The dance was being held in the church hall, which had been decorated with paper lanterns and autumn leaves. A fiddle band was already playing when they arrived, and the room was full of people laughing and talking. Ben led Victoria through the crowd, introducing her to people she had not yet met, watching with pride as she charmed everyone with her genuine interest and warm manner. When the band struck up a waltz, he held out his hand. "May I? I would like that very much." He led her onto the floor, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers gently. They began to move, and Ben was surprised to discover that Victoria was an excellent dancer, following his lead with natural grace. "You have done this before," he observed. "Richard took me to many society balls." Dancing was one of the few things we did well together. She said his name without the weight it usually carried, and Ben counted that as progress. They danced 3 more dances, taking breaks to drink punch and cool off in the night air outside. Other men asked Victoria to dance, and Ben let her go without complaint, though he found himself watching her the entire time, making sure she was comfortable and happy. It was nearly 10 o'clock when they finally left, walking slowly back toward the boarding house under a sky full of stars that seemed close enough to touch. "Thank you for tonight," Victoria said softly. "I have not felt this light-hearted in years." "You should feel that way every day," Ben replied. "You should wake up happy and go to bed content and spend the hours in between doing things that make you smile." She stopped walking and turned to face him. In the moonlight, her face was all shadows and soft curves. "Ben, I need to tell you something." His heart thudded hard against his ribs. "All right. I sent a telegram this morning to Richard. I told him that I cannot marry him, that it would not be fair to either of us." She twisted the ring on her finger, then slowly, deliberately pulled it off. "I am giving this back to him. I am staying in Brownsville." Relief and joy flooded through Ben in equal measure, but he kept his voice calm. "Are you sure? This is a big decision." "I am absolutely certain. I have been certain for weeks, but I was afraid to admit it. Afraid of disappointing people, of making a mistake, of being alone." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "But then I realized that staying with Richard would be the real mistake. I would be choosing fear over happiness, and that is no way to live." "No," Ben agreed. "It is not. There is something else." She took a deep breath. "I think you should know that my feelings for you have grown beyond friendship. If that makes you uncomfortable, I understand, but I needed to be honest." For a moment, Ben could only stare at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. Then he smiled, slow and warm. "Victoria, I have been halfway in love with you since the day you stepped off that stagecoach. but I saw that ring on your finger and I told myself I would wait, that I would be your friend and nothing more, for as long as it took, because you were worth waiting for." "Oh," she breathed, and then she was in his arms and he was kissing her under the Texas stars and everything else in the world fell away. It was a gentle kiss, sweet and tentative, full of promise and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, both a little breathless, Victoria laughed. "The whole town is going to be talking about this by morning. Let them talk." Ben cupped her face gently. "I am not ashamed of caring about you, neither am I." She leaned into his touch. "But I think we should still take things slowly. I have just ended an engagement and I do not want to rush into something new before I am ready." "I will wait," Ben said simply. "However long it takes. I told you that from the start." She smiled, and this time it reached every corner of her face, genuine and unguarded. "You are a remarkable man, Benjamin McClain. I am just a blacksmith who knows a good thing when he sees it." They walked the rest of the way to the boarding house hand in hand. At the door, Ben kissed her once more, brief and chaste, before saying good night. He walked home feeling like he was floating, his heart full to bursting. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Ben's life. True to his word, he did not push Victoria for more than she was ready to give. They spent time together whenever their schedules allowed. He would bring her lunch at the schoolhouse, and she would visit the livery with fresh bread from Mrs. Henderson's kitchen. On Sundays after church, they would take long walks along the river, talking about everything and nothing. The town watched their courtship with approval. Mrs. Henderson became Victoria's staunchest supporter, making sure to leave the parlor whenever Ben came calling, so they could have some privacy, though still maintaining proper propriety. The children at school started calling Ben Miss Brennan's sweetheart, which made Victoria blush and laugh in equal measure. November brought the first real cool weather, along with a cattle drive passing through town. Ben was kept busy at the livery, shoeing horses and repairing tack for the drovers. Victoria brought him dinner one evening when he was working late, and they sat together in the warm forge area, eating stew and cornbread, while he told her stories about his father and the early days of the livery. "He sounds like he was a good man," Victoria said, wiping her bowl clean with the last piece of cornbread. "He was. Stern but fair. He taught me everything I know about horses and metalwork, but also about integrity and treating people right." Ben set his own bowl aside. "I wish you could have met him. He would have liked you." "I would have liked to meet him too." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Ben, I received a letter from Richard today. His last one," he said. Ben tensed slightly. "What did it say?" "He wished me well. Said he hopes I find what I am looking for." She pulled the letter from her pocket and without ceremony tossed it into the forge. They watched it catch and burn, the paper blackening and curling. "That is the last tie. I am completely free now." "How do you feel?" Ben asked, relieved. "Sad, maybe, for what might have been if we had been different people, but mostly just light." She turned to him with a smile, ready to move forward. "With me?" he had to ask, had to hear her say it. "With you." She kissed him, and it felt like a beginning. December arrived with surprising cold, at least by South Texas standards. The temperature dropped into the 40s at night, and people talked about the possibility of seeing their breath on Christmas morning. The town prepared for the holiday with enthusiasm, and Victoria volunteered to organize a Christmas program at the school. Ben found himself roped into building sets for the nativity scene the children would perform. He did not mind. It gave him an excuse to spend more time with Victoria, and watching her direct a dozen excited children through their lines was endlessly entertaining. "No, Tommy, the sheep does not eat baby Jesus," Victoria said patiently for the third time. "The sheep stays over here with the shepherds." Ben bit back a laugh as Tommy, dressed in a cotton wool costume that made him look like a small cloud, reluctantly moved to his mark. "I do not know how you do it," Ben said when Victoria came over to check his progress on the stable backdrop. "I would have lost my patience an hour ago." "They are children. Patience is part of the job." But she was smiling. "Besides, they are all trying so hard, even Tommy." The program was scheduled for the evening of December 23rd. The whole town turned out, cramming into the schoolhouse to watch their children perform. Victoria had worked a small miracle, transforming nervous, giggly students into a reasonably cohesive cast. When the final hymn ended and the children took their bows to thunderous applause, Ben saw tears of pride standing in Victoria's eyes. Afterward, families lingered to share cookies and cider that the mothers had prepared. Ben stood with Victoria at the edge of the room, his arm around her waist in a gesture that had become natural over the past month. "You did an amazing job," he told her. "Those kids will remember this forever." "I hope so. I want to give them good memories, happy ones." She leaned into him slightly. "This is what I was meant to do, Ben. I am sure of it now. I never doubted it for a second." They stayed until the last family left, then cleaned up together by lamplight. When the schoolhouse was finally in order, Ben walked Victoria back to the boarding house through the cold, clear night. "Tomorrow is Christmas Eve," Victoria said as they reached her door. "Mrs. Henderson is hosting a dinner. She told me I could invite you if you would like to come." "I would like that very much." He paused, suddenly nervous about something he had been planning for weeks. "Victoria, I have something for you, a Christmas gift, but I want to give it to you now in private." Curiosity flickered across her face. "Should I be worried?" "I hope not." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, polished smooth and decorated with intricate carvings of horses and wildflowers. "I made this myself. The metalwork inside, too." Victoria opened the box carefully, and her breath caught. Nestled inside on a bed of velvet was a ring, simple but beautiful. The band was silver, forged from a horseshoe nail that Ben had worked for hours to shape and smooth. Set into it was a small piece of turquoise, the color of summer sky. "Ben," she whispered, "it is beautiful." "It is not fancy like what you had before," he said, the words coming in a rush. "And I am not asking you to marry me, not yet. I know you need more time. But I wanted you to have something that represents what we are building together. Something made with my own hands, something honest and true." She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "It is perfect. It is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me. Will you wear it? Not as an engagement ring, but as a promise that I am here, that I am not going anywhere." "Yes." She pulled the ring from its box and held it out to him. "Will you put it on me?" With hands that shook only slightly, Ben slipped the ring onto her right hand, the opposite of where she had worn Richard's ring. It fit perfectly, because he had measured carefully using a ribbon she had worn around her wrist one day and then left behind. "Thank you," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for waiting." "I would wait forever if that is what you needed," Ben replied. "But I am glad I do not have to." She kissed him then, there on the porch of the boarding house, no longer caring who might see. It was a kiss full of promise and passion, of gratitude and hope. Christmas Eve dinner at Mrs. Henderson's was a warm, boisterous affair with too much food and even more laughter. When Ben and Victoria arrived together, her wearing his ring, the knowing looks and smiles from the other guests confirmed that their relationship was officially blessed by the community. Winter passed into spring with the kind of gentle progression that only happened in South Texas. The wildflowers bloomed in March, painting the landscape in brilliant colors. Ben and Victoria continued their courtship, growing closer with each passing week. They talked about their futures, about the life they might build together. Victoria admitted that she had always wanted children of her own, a whole houseful of them. Ben confessed that he had been lonely running the livery by himself, and that he had dreams of expanding the business, maybe taking on an apprentice. In April, a traveling photographer came through town, and Ben insisted on having their portrait made. They stood stiffly in their best clothes, Victoria seated and Ben standing behind her with his hand on her shoulder, both of them trying not to smile at the absurdity of holding still for so long. When the photograph was developed a week later, though, Ben was struck by how right they looked together, how much like a family. It was in early May, with the heat of summer just beginning to make itself known, that Ben finally worked up the courage to propose properly. He had been carrying his grandmother's wedding band in his pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. He found it on a Sunday afternoon. They had ridden out to a spot along the river that Ben had loved since childhood, a place where cottonwood trees provided shade and the water ran clear over smooth stones. They sat on a blanket Victoria had brought, eating cold chicken and biscuits, talking lazily about nothing in particular. "Victoria," Ben said when they had finished eating, "can I ask you something serious?" She looked up from where she had been trailing her fingers in the water. "Of course." He took a deep breath, suddenly more nervous than he had ever been in his life. "We have been courting for 7 months now. In that time, I have come to know you better than I have ever known another person. I know that you hum when you are grading papers, that you are afraid of scorpions but not snakes, that you cry at weddings and laugh at funerals when someone tells a good story about the deceased. I know that you are brave and kind and smart and that you have the biggest heart of anyone I have ever met. Ben." She started, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish, please." When she nodded, he continued, "I also know that I love you. I have loved you since the day you arrived wearing another man's ring, and I loved you through all the days and weeks when I did not know if you would ever be free to love me back. I told you I would wait until you were ready, and I have kept that promise. But Victoria, I am hoping, praying that you might be ready now." He pulled the ring from his pocket and held it up. It was a simple gold band, worn smooth by decades of wear, but it caught the light beautifully. "This was my grandmother's ring. My grandfather gave it to her in 1838, 40 years ago. They were married for 35 years before she passed, and he said every day with her was a gift. I want that kind of love, Victoria. I want it with you." Victoria was crying now, tears rolling down her cheeks unchecked. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I am. Victoria Brennan, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes." The word came out as a sob and a laugh mixed together. "Yes, Ben, yes. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her left hand, and then she was in his arms and they were both laughing and crying at the same time. He kissed her with all the love and longing that had been building in him for months, and she kissed him back with equal fervor. "I love you," she said when they finally broke apart. "I love you so much. I think I have loved you since you carried my bags to the boarding house and did not ask about the ring. I love you too, more than I can put into words." He held her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest. "When do you want to get married?" "As soon as possible." She laughed at the surprise on his face. "What? I have waited long enough. We both have. I do not need a big society wedding with hundreds of guests. I just need you and a preacher and people who care about us." "What about the end of the school term? That is only a month away. It would give us time to get ready, and then we could have the whole summer together before you have to go back to teaching." "Perfect." She kissed him again. "Absolutely perfect." The next month passed in a flurry of preparations. Mrs. Henderson threw herself into planning a wedding reception, enlisting half the women in town to help. Victoria sewed her own wedding dress, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored silk that she had ordered from San Antonio. Ben worked on fixing up the small house behind the livery, the one his father had built when he first arrived in Brownsville. It needed repairs and fresh paint, but it had good bones and enough room to start a family. They were married on June 15, 1879, in the same church where they had danced together all those months ago. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, with the whole town in attendance. Victoria walked down the aisle unescorted, having no family present, but she did not look sad about it. Her eyes were only for Ben, standing at the altar in a new suit, his hair neatly combed and his face lit with joy. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, and Ben felt his throat tighten with emotion. The vows were traditional, but when Ben promised to love and cherish Victoria for all his days, he meant every word with his entire being. When Victoria promised to honor and respect him, her voice was clear and strong, no hesitation at all. "I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss your bride." Ben did, tenderly at first and then with more passion, until the congregation broke into applause and laughter. They walked back down the aisle hand in hand, Mr. and Mrs. Benjamin McClain, ready to start their life together. The reception was held in the church hall, with tables full of food and a fiddle band playing cheerful dance tunes. Ben and Victoria danced their first dance as husband and wife, and then they danced with what seemed like everyone in town. By the time the sun set and the lanterns were lit, Victoria had kicked off her shoes and Ben had long since abandoned his jacket. "Happy?" he asked, pulling her close for another dance. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she replied, resting her head against his chest. "Thank you for waiting for me, Ben. Thank you for seeing me when I did not even see myself. Thank you for taking a chance on a simple blacksmith in a border town," he countered. "You could have gone anywhere, been anything. I went exactly where I was meant to be. I became exactly who I was meant to become." She looked up at him with eyes full of love. "And I found the person I was meant to spend my life with. I would not change a single thing." They left the reception near midnight, walking hand in hand through the quiet streets to their newly renovated home. Ben carried Victoria over the threshold, making her laugh and cling to his neck. He set her down gently in the front room where a lamp was burning low and everything was clean and ready for them. "Welcome home, Mrs. McClain," he said softly. "Home," she repeated, and the word sounded like a prayer. "Yes, this is home now." Their wedding night was tender and passionate, full of whispered words and gentle exploration. Ben made love to his wife with reverence and care, determined to show her with his body what he could not always express in words. Victoria gave herself to him completely, without reservation or fear, trusting him with her heart and her body. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, her head on his chest and his arms around her, both of them too full of emotion and satisfaction to sleep just yet. "I was so lost when I came here," Victoria said quietly. "I did not even realize how lost I was until I found my way home." "You saved yourself," Ben replied. "You made the hard choice to walk away from what was expected and find what would make you happy. I just had the good fortune to be here when you arrived. Do not sell yourself short. You showed me what real love looks like, patient and kind, with no expectations or demands. You let me find my own way while making sure I knew you would be there at the end of the journey." She kissed his chest, right over his heart. "That took courage and faith." "You are worth both," he said simply. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and in the peace of knowing they had found what so many people spent their whole lives searching for. The summer months were blissful. Victoria did not teach during the break, so she had time to fully settle into her role as Ben's wife. She learned to cook the way he liked, though she was the first to admit she would never match Mrs. Henderson's skills. She helped at the livery when business was busy, proving surprisingly adept at dealing with difficult customers and managing accounts. Ben taught her to ride properly, not the side saddle style she had learned back east, but astride like a Western woman, and they took long rides into the countryside on Sunday afternoons. They also spent hours just talking, learning each other in the way that newlyweds do. Victoria told Ben stories about her childhood in Philadelphia, about the mother she still missed, and the father who had been too consumed by his own grief to properly care for his daughter. Ben shared memories of growing up in Brownsville, of the dangers and excitements of living on the border, of the dreams he had carried since boyhood. In August, Victoria began to suspect that she might be pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling Ben, visiting the doctor in town to confirm. When Dr. Morrison gave her the news she had been hoping for, she practically floated home. She found Ben in the forge, working on a set of decorative iron gates that had been commissioned by one of the wealthy ranchers. He looked up when she entered, his face breaking into a smile at the sight of her. "Hey there, beautiful. What brings you by?" He set down his hammer and wiped his hands on his leather apron. "I have news," Victoria said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. Something in her tone made him step closer, concern flickering across his features. "Is everything all right? Everything is wonderful." She took his hands in hers, not caring that they were dirty from work. "Ben, we are going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, processing. Then his face transformed, joy spreading from his eyes to his mouth to his entire body. He let out a whoop of delight and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around in a circle. "We are having a baby. Victoria, that is incredible." He set her down carefully, suddenly worried. "Wait, should I be spinning you like that? Is that safe?" She laughed at his concern. "I am fine. Dr. Morrison says I am perfectly healthy and the baby should arrive in early March, a spring baby." Ben's hand went to her stomach, which did not yet show any sign of the life growing within. "Our baby, I can hardly believe it. In 7 months we are going to be parents." She covered his hand with her own. "Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. He pulled her close, holding her as though she were made of precious glass. "I am going to be a father." "You are going to be a mother. We are going to have a family." "We already are a family," Victoria corrected gently. "But yes, we are going to expand it." The news spread through town with the speed of wildfire. Everyone was thrilled for them, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes and warnings about sleepless nights that made Ben slightly nervous and Victoria laugh. Mrs. Henderson was particularly excited, already planning to knit enough blankets and booties to outfit a dozen babies. As Victoria's pregnancy progressed, Ben became increasingly protective. He did not want her lifting anything heavy or standing for too long. He hired a young man named Jack to help full-time at the livery so he could spend more time at home with Victoria. She found his concern both touching and occasionally frustrating, insisting that she was pregnant, not made of porcelain. "Ben, I am going to carry a basket of laundry to the clothesline," she said one October afternoon when he tried to take it from her. "I am not going to break." "I know, I just worry." He followed her outside anyway, hovering as she hung sheets and shirts to dry in the warm breeze. "I love that you worry, but you have to let me do things. I will go mad if I spend the next 5 months sitting in a chair like an invalid." She softened her words with a kiss to his cheek. "I promise I will ask for help if I need it." He grumbled but agreed, though she caught him watching her with concerned eyes whenever he thought she was not looking. When school started again in September, Victoria returned to teaching, though she knew it would only be for a few months. The children were delighted to see her, and even more excited when she told them there would be a baby coming. They immediately started planning gifts and arguing about whether it would be a boy or a girl. "I hope it is a girl," said Emma Parker, one of Victoria's brightest students. "Then she can grow up to be a teacher like you, Mrs. McClain." "It is going to be a boy," Tommy Henderson insisted, "and he will learn to shoe horses from Mr. McClain." Victoria smiled at their enthusiasm. "Boy or girl, I am sure the baby will appreciate having all of you as friends." In November, Victoria finally stopped teaching, her pregnancy now obvious enough that climbing the stairs to the schoolhouse was becoming difficult. The school board had already hired a temporary replacement, a young woman from Austin who would cover until Victoria was ready to return after the baby was born. The winter months passed slowly. Victoria had more energy than she expected, so she threw herself into preparing the house for the baby. She and Ben converted the small room next to their bedroom into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and building a cradle from wood that Ben carefully selected and sanded smooth. Victoria sewed curtains and made tiny gowns and knitted blankets until her fingers were sore. Christmas was quiet that year, just the two of them and Mrs. Henderson. They exchanged simple gifts and ate too much of Mrs. Henderson's famous pecan pie. In the evening, Ben and Victoria sat by the fire, her feet in his lap as he rubbed them gently, both of them marveling at the fact that next Christmas they would have a child. "You think we will be good parents?" Victoria asked, not for the first time. "I think we will make mistakes like all parents do," Ben replied honestly. "But I also think we will love this baby with everything we have, and that has to count for something." "Everything," Victoria agreed, placing her hand on her swollen belly. "Love counts for everything." The baby came on March 7th, 1880, after a long and difficult labor that left Ben pacing the front room while Mrs. Henderson and Dr. Morrison attended to Victoria. Her screams tore at his heart, making him feel helpless and useless. Finally, after nearly 12 hours, he heard a different sound, the thin, angry wail of a newborn. Dr. Morrison emerged from the bedroom, tired but smiling. "Congratulations, Ben. You have a healthy son." Ben nearly collapsed with relief. "And Victoria, is she all right?" "She is exhausted but fine. You can go in and see them now." Ben entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Victoria lay in the bed, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat and her face pale, but she was smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had knitted, and Ben could just see a small red face and a shock of dark hair. "Come meet your son," Victoria said softly. Ben approached slowly, almost reverently. When he looked down at the baby, something inside him shifted and settled. This was his child, his son. A perfect, miraculous little person that he and Victoria had made together. "He is beautiful," Ben whispered, reaching out to touch one tiny hand. The baby's fingers immediately wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength. "He is absolutely perfect." "He looks like you," Victoria observed. "Same chin, same dark hair. I think he has your eyes." Ben sat carefully on the edge of the bed, unable to look away from his son. "Have you thought about names?" They had discussed it endlessly over the past months, suggesting and discarding dozens of possibilities. Now, looking at the baby, Victoria said, "What about William, after your father?" Ben felt tears prick his eyes. His father's name had been William, and he had been gone for 5 years now. "Are you sure? I know you wanted to use your mother's name if it was a girl." "We will use it for the next one," Victoria said with tired confidence. "But this little man should be William Benjamin McClain." William Benjamin, Ben repeated, testing it out. Billy for short, when he is little perhaps, but William is a good, strong name for a man. Victoria yawned hugely. I am so tired, Ben. Will you hold him for a while, of course? Ben took the baby carefully, terrified of dropping him or holding him wrong. But William settled into his arms as though he belonged there, his eyes closing as he drifted into sleep. Ben sat there for hours, just holding his son and watching him sleep, marveling at the perfection of tiny fingernails and the way the baby's chest rose and fell with each breath. This was love, he realized. Not the romantic love he felt for Victoria, though that was real and powerful. This was something different, something primal and fierce. He would die for this child without hesitation. He would do anything to keep him safe and happy. When Victoria woke a few hours later, she found Ben still sitting there, William cradled against his chest. You are going to be a wonderful father, she said quietly. I am going to try, Ben replied. I am going to try every single day. The first few months with William were exhausting but joyful. The baby woke every few hours to nurse, leaving Victoria constantly tired. Ben helped as much as he could, changing diapers and walking William when he fussed, singing off key lullabies that somehow always seemed to work. The town embraced the newest member of the McClain family with enthusiasm. People brought gifts and food, offered advice and congratulations. Mrs. Henderson declared herself the baby's honorary grandmother and visited almost daily, often bringing fresh bread or stew to make sure Ben and Victoria were eating properly. By summer, William was starting to develop a personality. He smiled often and laughed when Ben tickled his feet. He loved being outside, staring up at the trees with fascination. Victoria recovered her strength and began talking about returning to teaching in the fall, though she was torn about leaving William even for a few hours each day. I could take him to the livery with me, Ben suggested one evening as they sat on the porch, William sleeping peacefully in Victoria's arms. Jack is good help, and I can manage the baby between customers. Are you sure? That is a lot to juggle. But Victoria looked relieved at the idea. I am sure. Besides, he should learn the family business early. Ben reached over to stroke William's soft hair. I want him to know that he can be anything he wants, but that there is honor in working with your hands. You are a good man, Benjamin McClain, Victoria said, leaning her head against his shoulder. I am a lucky man, he corrected. I have everything I ever wanted right here. Victoria did return to teaching that fall, with Ben bringing William to the livery each day. It was chaotic at times, especially when the baby was teething and fussy, but they made it work. Jack proved surprisingly good with the baby, often entertaining him while Ben worked on more delicate projects that required concentration. The years passed with the kind of gentle rhythm that defines a happy life. William grew into a curious, energetic toddler who wanted to be involved in everything. In the spring of 1882, Victoria discovered she was pregnant again. This time, Ben was calmer about it, his protective instincts tempered by experience. Their daughter, Catherine Ann, was born in October, just as the weather was finally cooling. She had Victoria's brown eyes and Ben's stubborn streak, crying lustily whenever she did not get her way. William, now 2.5, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Gentle Billy, Ben reminded him for the 100th time as William tried to pat Catherine's head with more enthusiasm than finesse. She is so small, William observed with wonder. You were that small once, Victoria told him, and we loved you just as much as we love Catherine. I love her too, William declared. I am going to protect her from everything. Ben and Victoria exchanged a smile over their son's head. I am sure you will, Ben said. With 2 children, life became even more chaotic. Victoria took a longer break from teaching this time, wanting to be home while Catherine was an infant. Money was sometimes tight, but the livery did steady business and they always had enough. What they lacked in material wealth, they made up for in love and laughter. In 1884, when William was 4 and Catherine 2, Victoria discovered she was pregnant for a third time. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, leaving her exhausted and sick for months. Ben worried constantly, but Victoria insisted she was fine. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him. "I am strong and Dr. Morrison says everything looks normal." Their second son, Samuel James, was born in April of 1885 after a relatively quick labor. He was smaller than his siblings had been, but healthy and strong. William and Catherine were both thrilled to have another baby in the house, fighting over who got to hold him first. "I am outnumbered now," Victoria joked to Ben one evening as he helped get all 3 children ready for bed. 4 men and 1 woman in this house." "Good thing you are tougher than all of us combined," Ben replied, wrestling a squirming Samuel into a nightshirt while William and Catherine ran circles around them. Victoria did not return to teaching after Samuel was born. With 3 children under 5, she had her hands full at home. She did not mind, though. These were the years she had dreamed of back in Philadelphia when she was engaged to Richard and contemplating a life of empty social obligations. This was messy and loud and exhausting, but it was also real and full of purpose. The children grew. William proved to have a natural talent for working with animals, often helping Ben at the livery, and showing a patience with difficult horses that surprised everyone. Catherine was bright and curious, learning to read before she turned 5 and constantly pestering Victoria with questions about everything. Samuel was quieter than his siblings, content to play by himself for hours, building elaborate structures with wooden blocks and sticks. In the summer of 1887, when Victoria was 31 and Ben 33, they took their family on a rare trip. They traveled north to San Antonio, wanting the children to see a real city and experience something beyond their small border town. They stayed for 3 days, visiting the old missions and letting the children marvel at the tall buildings and bustling streets. "It is impressive," Victoria said as they walked through the main plaza, "but I would not want to live here." "Neither would I," Ben agreed. "Too many people, too much noise." "I like Brownsville better," William announced. "You can see the stars there." "Me too," Catherine and Samuel chorused. That night, in the hotel room with all 3 children asleep on pallets on the floor, Ben and Victoria lay together in the darkness and talked quietly. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if you had stayed in Philadelphia?" Ben asked. "If you had married Richard?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. I imagine I would be living in a big house, throwing dinner parties and pretending to care about society gossip. I would probably have children, but they would be raised mostly by nannies. Richard would be successful and busy, and I would be lonely." She turned to face him in the darkness. "I would have been miserable, Ben. I know that with absolute certainty." "I am glad you came to Texas," he said simply. "So am I. Best decision I ever made, getting on that stagecoach." She kissed him softly. "I love the life we have built together. Every messy, chaotic, wonderful bit of it. Even when the children wake us up before dawn and Samuel draws on the walls with charcoal from the forge," Ben teased, "especially then." Victoria laughed. "Those are the moments that make life real." They returned to Brownsville at the end of the week, all of them happy to be home. The children ran through the house, checking that everything was just as they had left it, while Ben and Victoria unpacked their few belongings. "It is good to be home," Victoria said, echoing the sentiment she had expressed on her wedding night all those years ago. "It really is," Ben agreed. The years continued to pass. William turned 10, then 12, then 14, growing tall and strong like his father. He officially started working at the livery after school, learning the business from the ground up. Catherine became involved in the church, helping with Sunday school and organizing charity drives for families in need. She talked about becoming a teacher like her mother someday. Samuel remained quiet but showed an unexpected talent for drawing, filling page after page with sketches of horses and landscapes and his family. In 1892, Victoria turned 36 and Ben 38. They had been married for 13 years, together for 14. Their children were 12, 10, and 7, healthy and happy. The livery was successful enough that Ben had taken on a second full-time employee. Victoria had returned to teaching part-time, working with older students who needed extra help with reading and writing. One evening in late spring, they sat on their porch as they had countless times before, watching the sun set over the river. The children were inside, William helping Catherine and Samuel with their homework. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Victoria asked, not for the first time over the years. "All the time," Ben admitted. "I think about you stepping off that stagecoach with another man's ring on your finger. I think about how I almost did not talk to you, almost let you walk past me into a life where we never knew each other." "I am glad you talked to me," Victoria said softly. "I am glad you were brave enough to walk away from what was expected and choose what made you happy." Ben took her hand, his thumb rubbing over the silver ring he had made her all those years ago. She still wore it on her right hand, even though his grandmother's wedding band claimed her left. "I am glad you gave me a chance. You said you would wait until I was ready," Victoria reminded him, "and you kept that promise. That is the kind of man you are, Ben. That is why I fell in love with you." "I would do it all again," Ben said. "Every moment of waiting, every moment of uncertainty, it was all worth it to end up here with you, with our family." "Me too." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, comfortable and content. "I found everything I was looking for when I came to Texas. I found myself, I found my purpose, and I found you. What more could anyone ask for?" "Nothing," Ben said. "Absolutely nothing." Inside the house, they heard laughter as one of the children said something funny. The sound drifted out to them on the evening breeze, mixing with the call of birds settling in for the night and the distant sound of the river flowing endlessly toward the Gulf. "We did good," Victoria said quietly. "We did," Ben agreed. "We really did." They sat there until the stars came out, one by one, filling the sky with familiar light. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and small joys, the endless work of raising children and running a business and building a life together. But tonight, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Victoria thought back to that first day, stepping off the stagecoach with Richard's ring heavy on her finger and fear heavy in her heart. She had been so lost then, so uncertain of who she was or what she wanted. And then Ben had appeared, offering simple kindness with no strings attached. He had seen her, truly seen her, and had given her the space and time to figure out what she needed. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" Ben asked. "For being patient, for waiting, for loving me even when I did not know how to love myself yet." "Thank you for taking a chance on a simple blacksmith," Ben replied. "Thank you for choosing this life, choosing me, choosing us." "Always," Victoria promised. "I will always choose you." They kissed then, soft and sweet, a gesture of love that had become as natural as breathing over the years. Then they went inside, to their children and their home and the life they had built together. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage and faith at a time. And if sometimes, late at night, Victoria thought about Richard and wondered what had become of him, she never regretted her decision. She had traded a gilded cage for freedom, loneliness for love, expectation for authenticity. She had become the woman she was meant to be, and she had found the man she was meant to love. As for Ben, he thought often about that first day, about the gamble he had taken in approaching a woman who wore another man's ring. He had told her he would wait, and he had meant it. But he had never imagined that the waiting would lead to this. A wife he adored, children he loved with his whole heart, a life that felt full and meaningful in every way. They had built something beautiful together, brick by brick, moment by moment. And it all started with a simple choice. Ben choosing to offer kindness, Victoria choosing to accept it. From that small seed, an entire life had grown. The years continued to flow forward as years do. William grew into a man, taking over more and more of the livery business as Ben began to slow down in his 40s. He fell in love with the daughter of a local rancher, a capable young woman named Sarah who could ride and rope as well as any man. They married when William was 21, and a year later made Ben and Victoria grandparents for the first time. Catherine did become a teacher, taking over Victoria's position at the schoolhouse when Victoria finally retired in her early 50s. She married a young doctor who came to Brownsville in 1898, and they had 4 children who kept both sets of grandparents constantly busy. Samuel, quiet Samuel, grew into a talented artist. He moved to Austin for a few years to study, but eventually returned to Brownsville and opened a small studio where he painted portraits and landscapes. He married later than his siblings, but when he did, it was to a woman who understood his quiet nature and loved him all the more for it. Through it all, Ben and Victoria remained the steady center of their growing family. They grew old together gracefully, their hair turning silver and their faces gaining lines that told stories of laughter and love. They never lost their habit of sitting on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over the river. In 1904, on their 25th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration that brought out half the town. There was food and music and dancing, just like on their wedding day. Ben and Victoria danced together as they had so many times before, though now they moved more slowly, their steps careful but still perfectly in sync. 25 years, Victoria marveled. Where did the time go? Right here, Ben said, gesturing to the crowd of people around them, all connected to them by blood or love or both. Every moment, every choice, every day led to this, and I would not change a single second. Neither would I, Victoria agreed. Not 1 second. When they finally made their way home that night, exhausted but happy, they stood together in the bedroom they had shared for a quarter century. Victoria looked at herself in the mirror, seeing a woman in her late 40s with silver threading through her dark hair and lines bracketing her eyes. "I am old," she said, not sadly but with simple observation. "You are beautiful," Ben corrected, coming to stand behind her. "You have always been beautiful from the first moment I saw you, but now you are beautiful in a different way. You are beautiful like a well-loved book or a favorite song. Beautiful because of everything we have been through together." Victoria turned in his arms, looking up at the man she had loved for more than 25 years. "How did I get so lucky?" "I ask myself the same question every day," Ben replied. They made love that night with the ease and familiarity of long partnership, but also with the tenderness of new lovers who still marveled at their fortune in finding each other. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Victoria thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived in Brownsville. That Victoria had been wearing another man's ring and carrying another man's expectations. She had been lost and scared, uncertain of her own worth or what she wanted from life. And then Ben had said those words that changed everything. "I will wait until you are ready." He had kept that promise, giving her the time and space to figure out who she was and what she needed. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift anyone could offer, the freedom to choose her own path, with the knowledge that he would be there whenever she was ready. She had been ready in the end. Ready to love, ready to be loved, ready to build a life that was messy and real and utterly, completely hers. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Ben replied, his voice thick with sleep and contentment. "Always have, always will." They drifted off to sleep like that, wrapped in each other and in the peace of a life well lived. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, and the river flowed endlessly toward the sea. Inside, two people who had found each other against all odds rested in the home they had built together, surrounded by the evidence of their love in the form of children and grandchildren, and a quarter-century of shared moments. The story that had begun with a ring and a promise had become something far greater. A love that had stood the test of time, a family that would carry forward for generations, a legacy of choosing courage over fear and authenticity over expectation. And if you had asked either of them if they had any regrets, they would have answered without hesitation. None. Not a single one. Because every choice, every challenge, every moment of doubt and difficulty had led them exactly where they were meant to be together. Home. Forever.